The thing about blues music, it is at the root of so much, and it has bled over to so many genres, even those that it perhaps didn't foundationally sort of jumpstart, it's bled into them. And even into country music early on, guys like Jimmy Rogers, for example, absolutely knew bluesmen and learned from them. Elvis Presley absolutely was influenced by the blues when he was going his country, gospel, and eventually rock and roll route. So it touches everything. Early R&B, obviously, soul, rock and roll, just all the way through. And of course, a lot of the overseas, particularly British rockers, gave a lot of credit where credit was due. The Rolling Stones in particular, but even like the Beatles, one of their last two albums, Let It Be maybe, they name-checked like Elmore James, B.B. King, there's like three bluesmen name-checked, even though their music is not as obviously blues influenced. So, it was everywhere and is everywhere, even if people don't fully acknowledge it. And we're basically standing where that came from. So it's a global phenomenon that started in the cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta. And I will get people who come in my store, Cathead here in Clarksdale, and will say things like, well, I don't really like blues. My whole thing is, well, what do you think blues is? Give me the example. What have you heard? Because a lot of people, it's the blues in the background of a beer commercial, or, maybe it's B.B. King, which is a very distinct style. Or they may think Stevie Ray Vaughan is blues. Well, he's a blues-influenced rocker, but it's such a wide genre because it's touched so many people, so many performers, songs, everything through the years. But we still have the real thing here in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And we have live blues 365 nights a year, over a dozen annual festivals. And what's amazing is that not only can you be sitting at a Ground Zero Blues Club or a Red's Lounge on a Saturday night and seeing some great local performer, you can also look at the audience and see they're from all over the world. I mean, literally, countries everywhere. It's insane, really, what we get.
Where y'all from up there?
Switzerland.
Switzerland, all right. Norway, all right.
Australia.
Australia, all right. Good day, man.
Good day.
Yeah, welcome out to Clarksdale. Thank you very much.
And it just shows you the appeal of blues around the world. But it all came from here originally and moved northward to the Great Migration and then outward to the world. So when we talk about blues music, we're talking about two things. There is the genre. I'm a record store, so I have a genre of blues that you can go A through Z and select recordings. But there's also the culture that it came from. And blues is the voice of that culture. Blues, gospel music, different things that came out of African American culture, specifically from the Mississippi Delta. And Clarksdale was once the golden buckle on the cotton belt. And if we're going to talk about blues music, we're going to talk about blues history, we have to talk about cotton, we have to talk about the Mississippi Delta. But today I think a lot of people talk about blues music as though it's just another genre of music. And it's really not. It is a voice of a culture, it came from a place, it came from a time. And somebody like an Anthony Big A Sherrod is a great example of all that. He does not work with a set list. You will not see a set list sitting on the stage. It is whatever songs pop in his head based on the moment, based on memories, based on the audience. And those songs, if he didn't write them, or they weren't true traditional songs that are floating out there, then he learned them from specific people, the Big Jack Johnsons of the world, people like that, who were just flowing in and out of these juke joints and house parties and yard parties. You'd be a kid running around at a yard party, or a little bit older kid trying to sneak into a juke joint, and you'd see these performers. And these performers were making the money, and if they were men, they had the ladies, and there was alcohol flowing. It looked like a really great existence. And so the kids would try to emulate that music. They did not learn their music from books. There is no sheet music. I will get that question occasionally for sheet music for Robert Johnson or whatever. People had done tablature, so you can kind of try to approximate the notes. But this is the music that was passed on, either literally a musician teaching another musician, or in most cases, just observing it. And from there, of course, they take it to possibly becoming professional musicians, or at least professional part-time musicians, which is what most of the bluesmen were here. There was still field work or day jobs, in addition to the music that was mainly a weekend kind of release for people that worked those hard lives. And somebody like a Mr. Johnny Billington, specifically, older bluesman from Lambert, Mississippi, and spent a lot of time in Clarksdale. Went north, had a job in a factory. My understanding is perhaps he got injured, came back, and found that the music was just kind of disappearing, A, And B, these neighborhoods had fallen on hard times. And he really thought that he could use blues music to sort of pull a couple of those kids up and out of that neighborhood. And Mr. Johnny taught guys like Big T, Harvell, and Deon Thomas, but also Anthony Big A Sherrod, Lee Williams, the drummer, and others. And without him, I really believe we would not have the blues scene that we have today. There'd be a blues scene, but it would be different. And Mr. Johnny is one of those unsung heroes of blues because he didn't really record much. He didn't tour the world himself, but he really was in the trenches teaching and giving the experience to these young musicians for years. There's a great book called Deep Blues by Robert Palmer, the music critic. And at the end of the book, he says something to the effect, it's a rhetorical question, how much history can be transmitted by pressure on a guitar string? What that's saying is when a real culturally connected blues person plays that music, you are hearing all those people, all those years, all that hard work that came before. I could write a blues song today and go out and perform a blues song. That is the genre of music. I did not grow up within the culture. I did not have those hard times. I'm not from Mississippi originally. Doesn't mean you can't write and perform a blues song. But what sets apart the blues musicians who came from here and come from here is they came up through it. Anthony Big A Sherrod is one of those people. When he's performing, you're hearing Wesley Junebug Jefferson, Dr. Michael James, Big Jack Johnson, Mr. Johnny, all these other players, Bilbo Walker, who he spent time with. And I think that's the best way to learn about the history of the blues, is to really just hear it from the real bluesmen. And then, of course, go and do the research, buy the records, spend some time and money, and you will find that it's not only the origins of perhaps the music most people listen to today, it is important unto itself, and it speaks to a place like a Clarksdale, Mississippi, like the Mississippi Delta.